Welcome back to Mostly Movies, where we mostly discuss movies mostly. Today we're going to actually go a little off track. We're going to talk about TV and streaming and basically a few Star Wars announcements that have been made recently. Breathe. Just breathe. Okay. The Mandalorian is done for me. We're up to the seventh episode of the season. There's one more episode to go. And the Bo Katan show, as it has now become, because The Mandalorian is a supporting character in his own show, is quite boring. There was no really good, hard explanation for why Grogu is back. It shouldn't be, well, you should have watched the Book of Boba Fett. Well, what if you didn't watch the Book of Boba Fett? And honestly, if you didn't see the Book of Boba Fett, you weren't missing anything. Because other than the opening when he escapes the Sarlacc pit and maybe like a few other minutes, the show was pretty weak. Um, Star Wars lately has a thing of just defanging and declawing anything that made Star Wars cool or edgy or exciting or interesting. They just get rid of that. And then you give me a Mandalorian episode. First of all, Mandalorian season that's been subpar, especially after the first two seasons were great, and the second season ended with what I didn't expect to be a jumping of the bantha, but apparently it was, where you have a moment that's so great and so powerful as the ending of season two when a certain Jedi showed up, and you basically should have been the end of your series because you're never going to find a way to top that moment. That's number one. Number two, you have nothing else going on this season. I don't care about a bunch of people going back to Mandalore and they didn't know if it was environmentally safe. Then they find out it's safe. They go back there, and then the Imperials show up, and Gus Fring is flying around. Now, it was cool to see him with that Mandalorian helmet, yes. But, Grogu like Krang walking around in the big robot and saying yes, yes, no, no. It was really. This has been. I mean, I didn't realize that this could suck. That we would get to this point where even The Mandalorian is not working. And I'll say it again, and I had a feeling, because I loved the first two seasons of Mandalorian, I knew eventually they'd screw it up, but I didn't think they'd screw it up this early. Like, if the show had gone on for 8, 9 years, okay, no show should last past 5 years. Um, so, like, by season six, season seven, it would start getting as lame as it has gotten. But the minute I saw Jack Black and Lizzo show up, it had me nostalgic for B. Arthur and the Jefferson Starship. Yes, this is holiday special territory, folks. This is where we are. And it's only the third season. I mean, TV shows used to have 24 episodes, and they wouldn't blow it till maybe the seventh or the eighth season. Like, you take a show like 24, or Lost. When it first went on, Lost, the first three seasons were 22 episodes each. And it was great pretty much all the way through, you know. Well, 24 lost it, but it didn't start losing it until like season six, season seven. That's when it started to fall apart. But how many episodes have they done up until that point? Over 100. Like, we're not even 30 episodes into The Mandalorian. It's already become boring and pointless, and they're talking about the sequel trilogy, and they name dropped Captain Hux's father, I guess it is, and they had Captain Pelion, who's a character from Heir to the Empire. Heir to the Empire, for you folks that don't know, was a series of books that came out in like 91. It started, and it was basically like the beginning of the expanded universe, getting everybody excited for George Lucas because he was getting back to writing the prequels again, and we were really excited for that in the early 90s. And then the movie came out, and Misa called Jar Jar Binks, and yes, it was a very difficult time to be a Star Wars fan. But even though it was a difficult time to be a Star Wars fan around the time of the prequels, you could still follow what was going on. There wasn't 10 million shows coming at you that are all basically mediocre or bad, and even the ones that are great lose it, and they lose me. There's moments of greatness here. There was Tales of the Jedi last year, which was great. But to be honest with you, ever since Disney has gotten Star Wars, the one product that they produced that started good and stayed good till the end was Rebels. That was it. And to be honest with you, that wasn't even that great of a show. The first two seasons, especially the second season, were very good. After that, it just kind of dragged out a little bit. It went on a little too long. But the fourth season, especially the last 10 episodes or so, were excellent. So that's like the only product that remained consistent during the Disney reign. The sequels were sort of the Matrix trajectory. Like, I like the first one a lot, and I personally like the second one, even though a lot of people did not like The Last Jedi. I thought it was great because, like the Matrix Reloaded, it was presenting all these cool different ideas, and it was going to take things in wild, bold, new directions for Star Wars. And then, like the Matrix Revolutions, The Rise of Skywalker comes out, and you're so pumped for this movie, or at least I was. And basically everything that the other movie was promising and all these cool new frontiers that we're going to explore, nope. They didn't even wrap up like loose ends that had to be wrapped up. They just sort of did their own thing, and it was... J.J. Abrams cannot end anything. He's a good starting pitcher. He can't do middles. He can't do endings. He really can't do endings. Even if you watch his own films, even if you watch The Force Awakens or Super 8 or anything he's directed, the first half is usually great, and he loses it in the second half. Like, I do like The Force Awakens quite a bit, but the third act is nowhere near as good as the beginning and the second act. Like, he just has more going, and he just doesn't have a way to end it. He can't close the deal. But now we have these new announcements of these things at Star Wars Celebration that we're talking about now. 3 new Star Wars movies and lots more shows, and the Ahsoka show and everything. And I think part of the reason Mandalorian Season 3 is so lame is that they put everything into Ahsoka. It's sort of like the 4th season of Alias. J.J. Abrams left that show to really work on Lost, and the first season of Lost, making sure it was really strong. And Alias suffered for that. And the first 3 seasons of Alias were great, and then the 4th just completely dropped the ball. They forgot what the show was. They barely had a 5th season, and then the show ended. And that's a real shame, because Alias actually was a very good show for those first 2 or 3 years. Especially season 2 was incredible. But that's what happened to The Mandalorian, I believe. I think that they put all their resources into the Ahsoka show. Now what's going to happen with the Ahsoka show? What, that'll be good for a season or 2, and then they'll destroy that because they have something else that they got to sell, and there's something else that has to interconnect. And I like Katie Sackhoff, and I like the character of Bo-Katan, but I like it for like 2 episodes, 3 episodes. I'm not following this thing around for every episode now. It's really losing me. Now, very quickly, we're going to talk about the 3 Star Wars movie announcements, which were, let's see, there was the, I can't even remember, hold on. I think it was what was it? There's 3 coming out, 3 different time periods. One is about the Dawn of the Jedi. The other one's like a sort of a Mando timeline movie directed by Dave Filoni. Now we up in the big leagues, Dave. And then there's going to be a sequel to the sequel trilogy where we see Rey and how she's doing with the new Jedi Order. And, it's going to be the same thing, more unearned girl power. It's just basically like they just are gifted the Force, and they're gifted the galaxy far, far away. And it's not that anything that has to be worked for or won through real perseverance and real combat, but it's just basically like, here's the keys to Star Wars. Here's the keys to the Jedi. Luke had to go through some stuff. He went on a journey from being a whiny little kid to a Jedi master. He earned that, and she should have earned it instead of just all being like by accident or by a gift. I mean, that's sort of like almost like a prequel logic, whereas like, it just doesn't make any sense really. It's just kind of there. But I will see it, and I will see the other 2 movies as well, most likely on Disney Plus. I don't think I'm going to go pay whatever ticket prices are going to cost in 2 or 3 years, probably lots, to see a Star Wars movie in the theater, unless I. It's not about hearing good reviews, because a lot of these critics today, I can't really trust a lot of them. And no offense to you young people, but if you were like not around, if you're a lot younger than me, and you're reviewing Star Wars, you see Star Wars very differently than me. I wasn't quite born before the first movie, but I did grow up in the first wave. I was born in 79, and I grew up with these films in the 80s. And also what it was like to be a Star Wars fan in the 90s. Before the prequels, it was still a pretty cool thing. And then we had the prequels, and the prequels were crazy, and it was just a crazy time and all that. But if somebody is a critic and like they just grew up in a world where like the prequels already existed and the Clone Wars was already going on, and now they're movie critics, they could be brilliant, they can know a lot about movies, but it's just a bit of a gap. So I'm not going to go by critical reviews of these films. I'm going to go by word of mouth from my trusted friends and my own instincts about whether or not I want to spend my time watching whatever Star Wars they come up with, because I don't think any of it's going to be good, to be quite honest with you. The biggest problem that everybody doesn't realize, and it's not, I'm not going to go after Ray, and I'm not going to talk about this woke Hollywood that everybody's trying to label it, because I do believe that woke is a thing, and I do believe it's a lot of these studios that don't care, that are just pretending to care because it satisfies the people on Twitter. But at the same time, I feel like I'm I'm not interested in these movies, that, and it's not because of any political reason. It's not because I believe that Disney has an agenda. I don't think that they have any agenda. They're just another company like every other company that wants to make money, that wants to keep making work, that doesn't want to be bought by Apple or anybody else that has a ton of money, or Amazon or any one of them. But I just think they don't really care. I think they're happy with just giving us the bare minimum. And the problem is the bare minimum is not good enough. We want good stories. We want good films. I love the idea of women characters and I love the idea of diversity, but is it just done for its own sake? Or are you going to do something with these actors? Are you going to do something with these writers? I don't care. I don't care what they look like. I don't care what their gender is. I just want them to make good work that I want to go see. You know, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. There's no agenda. I don't think that Hollywood is being destroyed by this woke nonsense or anything. And it is real and it is ruining lots of stuff. But at the end of the day, I think as any company, especially Disney, wants to make a few bucks, it's not a big problem. Just make good work. The problem is, if you make films, 3 Star Wars films in 3 different time periods, you're going to lose people. You're going to confuse people. Now, the hardcore fans will always be there for every Star Wars. These are the people that dress up in costume. They go to Star Wars Celebration. They're at the conventions. They'll be there, but there's not that many of them that you think. Then there's a big contingent of fans that are hateful, that are like, I will not see it. I refuse to see it because of whatever. So you have that problem. But then there's the average film goers, and the average filmmaker says, oh, look, there's a new Star Wars movie. Maybe I'll go see that. And it's about the Dawn of the Jedi set thousands of years ago. Say it's a good movie. They walk out, wow, that was cool. What's the next Star Wars movie coming out? Well, it takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi, and it has the Mandalorian, or it has this character. And what if they don't subscribe to Disney Plus? And what if they've never seen the Mandalorian? They're going to be confused. They're not going to know which time period they're in. What about the guy I just saw in the last movie that took place way in the past? And then they're going to make this sequel to the sequels with Rey. And they'll be like, who's Rey? I didn't see 7, 8, and 9. I missed that whole thing. Because you know what? A lot of people did miss the sequel trilogy, and they did miss a lot of these movies because they came out in a little pocket of time, in a little window of time. And if you weren't into it or you didn't get around to it, you just never ended up seeing the movie. And there's a lot of people that haven't seen them. So they don't know who Rey is. They don't know what any of this stuff is, or who is she? Is she Luke? Is she Leia's daughter? Is she Luke's daughter? Who is she? You know, so I believe that they're really confusing people. What they need to do is what Marvel did, which was basically make a universe of films starting with Iron Man, and continuing up to Endgame, because Endgame is the Abbey Road of Marvel. After that movie, why would I want to watch anything else? That's it. MCU 22. We'll always have the 22. Let's just keep it at that. Because Marvel after Endgame is a whole other video. But basically, what was great about those films, okay, we did have the little bit of flashback with Captain America, but it did bring it up to the present time. All those films basically are interconnected from Iron Man to Endgame, and there's a more or less linear narrative. Now, Captain Marvel is a bit of a flashback movie, and Captain America is also a flashback movie. However, they do tie into the current timeline. And that's the problem with these Star Wars movies, is that they don't tie into the timelines. Nobody knows what it's supposed to mean. Nobody knows how it's connected. Doesn't make sense. And I think that you're going to lose a lot of people, except for like the uber nerds, like the kind of people that watched the 7th episode now of The Mandalorian, when Gus Fring is talking to his little contingent there. And, he says Captain Pelion. And a little nerd light bulb went off right in here saying, Captain Pelion. Wait, I think that's the guy from Heir to the Empire. Oh, yeah, look at him. That's cool. Captain Pelion. Wow. But I'm a nerd. Of course I know who Captain Pelion is. But you don't. And you shouldn't. And I wish I didn't. But I do. So basically what they need to do is the fans that are lost, they may come back at some point. But you have a lot of fans that are lost right now. And then you have a big, giant sea of people, especially young people. Like, say people have kids that were babies when The Force Awakens came out, and they didn't see The Force Awakens and those films. Now they're starting to get to the age of 7, 8. This would be a good time to get into Star Wars. Unfortunately, there's no real new Star Wars to go see in the theater, and it's very confusing to catch up on Disney Plus, because I know Disney Plus does have certain things in the timeline order and how you should follow it, but people just want something new. They don't want to go through their Disney Plus queue that's full, that has 100 movies that they're not going to watch. They want to see something new and something interesting, and I really hope they can come up with it. I don't have much faith in Disney, but we'll see what happens. So I wanted to do big screen, and I want to talk about a film I saw in theaters. It's not Super Mario Brothers. I am planning on seeing that very soon. Not super excited for that, because like most video game movies, it's sort of like, reading Playboy for the articles. It's like, basically, why would I want to sit through a video game movie when I can just play the video game at home? I have Super Mario Brothers 3, and I could just play it again for the millionth time, and then, rage quit and curse myself for being old and not playing as good as when I was 11. But to just see a movie of it would basically be like just standing over somebody's shoulder watching them play the game. It's like Sonic the Hedgehog was sort of boring in that way. I know a lot of people like that movie, but basically, what's the point? Just let me play Sonic the Hedgehog. I have my old Mega Drive inside, or Genesis to you American audiences. And, that's all we need. But I saw Creed 3. Now, I really like this film. I like the whole Creed series, because it does get a little ridiculous. It does get a little much like the Rocky series. It loses itself a little bit, but however, I felt that what I always liked about the Creed movies is they were always more or less grounded in reality. And they're good movies, they're entertaining movies. What I like too is that they have a good moral message, all 3 films. And I think that these are films that what I like about them is that more people should see these films, especially young people, because they learn about real life. What I talk about is a big problem we have in films today is the ever adolescence, where basically they want kids to be young adults forever and grow up into adulthood. And what a lot of kids need to see now, Star Wars is fun and Marvel and DC is fun, but what kids need is they don't need grown-up superheroes. They need grown-up movies, because when I was a kid in the summer of '89, yeah, I saw Batman, three times. I saw Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and I saw Ghostbusters 2. I saw Star Trek 5. I should have done the cross for Ghostbusters 2, because Ghostbusters 2 is, God help us, cross-worthy for sure. Um, but I saw those fun kids movies, but I also saw that year Field of Dreams, Dead Poet Society, films like that, films that were about real life. And the escapist fun is nice and it has its place, but I think a lot of young people do not see films about real life and films about growing up where you learn something. Because it seems in Hollywood today that if somebody's going to make a drama, say like Dead Poet Society, if it were made today, it would probably be rated R, it'd probably have all this language in it and all this stuff, because they figure, well, kids aren't going to come see this movie. Let's do whatever we put in this movie. But I feel like the Creed movies, I think the trilogy, the whole trilogy stands alone in this age of Marvels and Star Wars and DC, that the Creed movies are movies that are PG-13, so you can take kids that are like 8 or 9 to see these films. And they're great films, and you learn a lot about life. And I think Michael B. Jordan did a great job directing. I really like the story of this film. I think what a lot of this film is about, more than the other two, this to me was really about the African American man and his experience in America and the struggle that many, many people endure, especially in the black community. And I felt that Jonathan Majors was great. It's unfortunate what's happening with him now in real life, but his character was great in the movie. And I've not seen him in Ant-Man 3. I hear he's very good in it, but he's a good actor, and it's unfortunate how sometimes real life can ruin great actors. Just ask, rest in peace, Tom Sizemore, who just passed away. But his performance is great. His character is great. And what's great about it is that he's not just kind of like this basically mustache twirling villain. Like, he's really going through some stuff, and he's really has stuff that he has to work out. So Creed 3 gets a horns up. Go see it. It's really good, or now it's on demand actually, but it's definitely worth checking out. Now on Trailer Park, we have the Electric Mayhem, which is coming to Disney Plus. I am very excited for this film, TV series, sorry. This is mostly movies where we talk about streaming shows. The Muppets are a great property, but they're a tricky property. And Disney has struggled since The Christmas Carol with making them relevant, making them funny, what's too funny, what's not funny. It's very tricky. You got to walk a very fine line with the Muppets, because it's sophistication disguised in children's entertainment, or basically like cheap humor. But it's really brilliant humor playing it low. It's like Monty Python, intelligent men being stupid. So it's very hard to get the Muppets right. James Bobbin did a great job with the Muppets in 2011. I thought that film was great. And the follow-up, Muppets Most Wanted, which is a very underrated film. It is streaming on Disney Plus, but you got to see the Blu-ray, because the extended cut of Muppets Most Wanted is great, which does include the Godfather 3 joke in the opening song. And see, that's just it. Like, when you watch the Muppets Most Wanted and you watch the opening song for the movie We're Doing a Sequel, they have a Godfather 3 joke and a Seventh Seal, Ingmar Bergman's Swedish masterpiece, The Seventh Seal. They have a Godfather 3 and Seventh Seal joke within 2 minutes of each other. And of course, both of those jokes killed me, and I thought they were hilarious. But your average person's going to be like, because they basically have in The Seventh Seal, Max von Sydow plays a game of chess with death itself. So what did the Muppets do? They have the Swedish chef playing chess with death. And the joke is he's the Swedish chef and Seventh Seal is a Swedish film. So I'm, laughing my film degree butt off. But all those people that don't have a degree in cinema, not getting it. But Electric Mayhem looks great. It looks fun. It looks exciting. Hopefully there'll be a lot of music in it. I have a little personal stake in this, because back in the 90s, I was actually writing an Electric Mayhem movie as a spec script that didn't quite happen. But I can't judge it against my idea. I have to judge it on its own merits. Same thing with G.I. Joe, which was another spec script that ever happened, and there was Star Trek scripts that never happened. There's a lot of scripts that never happened for many good reasons and many bad reasons. You know, sometimes the ideas were terrible, sometimes they were brilliant, but what are you going to do? I will see it. I will check it out. I did like that they have Weird Al Yankovic, and it was pretty funny to see Kevin Smith show up as the director of the documentary about them. I also liked the little Spinal Tap reference in the beginning when they were turning on the amplifier and it went to 11.5. Interesting. So I'll definitely give that a look. And last but not least, we have From the Vault. This is where we take a title, a DVD, and talk about it. Now, the one that I'm going to discuss this week is the brand new 4K release of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You people that know me know that this is my favorite horror film. Who will survive and what will be left of them? Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out in 1974. Before Halloween, before any of that, this was one of the earliest slashers ever made. Arguably, people can consider Psycho the first slasher, but what makes this film so terrifying, it's basically about, there are some grave robberies. So a group of teenagers are traveling through Texas. Sally and her brother Franklin are among them, and basically what they're doing is they're, going to visit their grandfather's grave, and they're gonna, spend a little time at his house. Now, unfortunately, their trip goes as wrong as you can possibly imagine. They basically meet a hitchhiker. Then they have a run-in at a farmhouse. A few people go missing. I'm not going to give much away. And little by little, there's down to one last person, and, who will survive and what will be left of them. The film is a masterpiece. It's directed by Tobe Hooper. It was a very shocking film for its time, and I think even today. Now, when I first saw this film back in the 90s, I was a teenager, and at the time I was really getting into horror films with one of my great film mentors. I don't remember any of the college professors, anybody I had at the College of Staten Island that was teaching me film, didn't teach me anything. But I had people in my life, special people in my life, between my dad, my older brothers, great people in my life that taught me about films. My cousin Christian, my friend Peter. These are people that were my real film teachers. These were the guys that were and ladies that were my film mentors, people that just introduced me to great films. And in high school, my brother-in-law, Philip Sinclair, he basically introduced me to so many great films. And he had worked at a video store when he was younger, so he knew a lot about films and a lot of comedies and a lot of classic films. And he was really, at the time, into horror films. And we'd go to West Coast Video and Hollywood Video and places like that, and we would rent Planet Video, was another one on Staten Island, which unfortunately is not there any longer. Neither any of them there any longer. But Planet Video was one of my favorites because they had a lot of hard to find stuff on VHS and DVD at the time. And we had seen so many great horror films together, and, Dawn of the Dead and several things, but very few of them frightened me. Very few of them scared me because, I was about 16 at the time, 17. And I loved these Evil Dead movies and I liked all this stuff. But a lot of it wasn't very, very scary. But this movie, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, this movie scared the crap out of me. It was one of the few that really terrified me. I would say another one that did that was David Cronenberg's The Brood. It was a film that really scares me to this day. But what got me about Texas Chainsaw is that it's so frightening because it could really happen. Like, this isn't just Freddy Krueger chasing kids around in a dream, or Jason Voorhees as a zombie, or even Michael Myers that was sort of like a zombie in and of himself. this was like, it felt real. It felt like there was something like a documentary style. It was shot on 16 millimeter. Um, and it really terrified me. Like, this movie is still, and it holds up, almost 50 years. And a year from now, Texas Chainsaw Massacre will be 50 years old, folks. That's insane. But this disc is great. It's from Second Sight Films, which is great. They're a great company. Was that? Yeah. And they have some great commentaries on here. Now, I've heard a few commentaries because I have about every release of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre that's come back, going all the way back to DVD, which, let me grab one over here, actually. Should have had that ready before I started filming. I've got this release here, signed by Edwin Neal. I think Gunnar Hansen, I got autograph from him, but he didn't sign that. Then I had the Steelbook. And then I had the Blu-ray Steelbook. So yeah, this is one of those films like Goodfellas, Superman, Star Wars that I have a couple of versions of it. And you can never have enough copies of a great film. I've got about maybe 4 copies of Goodfellas. I have the Flipper DVD, I have the 2-disc DVD, the Blu-ray, and the 4K. I got about 3 copies of Casino. Again, if a movie's great, have a couple copies of it, because you might lend it to a friend and you're like, I don't see them much anymore. And what happened to my copy of, Texas Chainsaw? So, but some film I don't lend out, because if you don't have Texas Chainsaw, I'm probably not going to be your friend. No, I'm just kidding. The movie's not for everybody. That's a word of warning. A lot of people are put off by this film, and a lot of people are very deeply disturbed and offended by it. And yeah, so it's a film that I do recommend, but recommend with a warning, because this is not one for everybody. So there's some great documentaries on here, great commentaries. The one that I really was impressive was William Friedkin interviewing Tobe Hooper. And that one really, really impressed me. That's a great interview. So it was worth checking out. All right, guys. So I didn't do the Oscar recap, I don't think. So let me quickly go through that. No surprises. Everything Everywhere All at Once wins. Whatever. It was a good movie. I think there's 5 or 6 movies that are better. Actually, I recently saw Babylon, which I thought was a great film. I can understand why people hate it. It's like Boogie Nights for the silent film era. It's not for everybody, but I think that if I had to pick a Best Picture winner, I think that probably would have been it. I just saw it after I did my top 10 list of the best films of the year, or top 5, and I think it is probably the best film of 2022. But again, not a film for everybody because it's a lot to take. Happy for John K. Kwan won the award, and Michelle Yeoh. It was very good to see her win. Brendan Fraser, I'm not interested in his movie. I'm not a big Darren Aronofsky fan. He's very talented, but his movies don't really do much for me. No offense to his fans, or to him if he happens to be watching this. Nothing personal. It's just not my cup of tea. Very happy for Jamie Lee Curtis, and she did kind of give a shout out to the horror fans. So that was good. Sorry, I should have drank more water before doing this video. But it was very good to see her win the award, even though I personally felt her better supporting performance of the year was in Halloween, and it would have been like sort of a career award for being the Scream Queen for all these years in the Halloween movies. But I was happy to see her win nonetheless. I don't care what movie it's for. Like Frank Langella once said in that terrible Bryan Singer Superman movie, no one cares what you won the Academy Award for as long as you got it. It was pretty cool. Oh, Superman Returns was so bad. What a disappointment, And there were moments of it that you're like, this is going to be great. And then they had the scene where the kid throws a piano at some guy, and I'm like, what am I watching? But it was good to hear the John Williams music. Man, that movie. Oh, God. The early days of comic book movies. It was rough, folks. So that's why we have nothing to complain about, even though now comic book movies are pretty much back to where they were like in the early to mid 2000s, where it's confusing, it's messy, nothing makes sense, and very few of it is interesting. Very little of it is interesting, I should say. But we'll see what happens. Okay, so I'm probably going to watch Super Mario Brothers and do a short video on that because this video is way too long. I've got to try to get mine and John's schedules together to discuss Masters of the Universe, 1987's masterpiece from Canon Films. I'm kidding, it's not a masterpiece. But you knew that, didn't you? But it's a movie that we love, and there's so many great films to discuss from 1987, like Evil Dead 2 and Raising Arizona and The Untouchables. But me and John are trying to get our schedule together to discuss Master of the Universe. Hopefully that'll be up shortly. Till then, this is Mostly Movies, signing off.